Ah, man, see what I mean about getting lots of stoner stuff? Again, not being a stoner, I have no idea how valuable my insight here is, but I'm happy to still give it. Earthless, however, wasn't a band I was immediately familiar with, but I gotta admit, I was pretty happy with what I got here, compared to something like Sleep, which is more doomy, gloomy, and more metallic and proggy. Earthless appears to be more just straight up rock. Which, hey, I'm all about that. Cool. The drums are much more vibrant and punchy. These guys aren't afraid to jack the tempo up a wee bit and get a proper rock and roll shakedown going. The guitar work here is also very intense. Like, god damn, this album is Solo City. Squealing, scorching riff work coats the album from head to toe. Rarely is there ever a moment on this thing where the guitar isn't making sweet, dirty love to the side of your face. Whether it's through a long, complicated solo or a ferocious power chord heavy riff, if you got a friend who always plays guitar while he blazes, this is the album for him. It shreds psycho, this thing. I gotta admit, I dig Isaiah Mitchell's vocals too. He's not Freddie Mercury or anything, but given the 70s laden, fuzzed out, shaggin' wagon vibe of this music, his style of vocal delivery feels very appropriate. It fit well right next to the likes of Clutch, Fu Manchu, or perhaps even Monster Magnet in places. Yeah, Space Lord Mother, you heard me. He's not gonna win any awards, but he does a solid job, which was doubly surprising to me, as I later discovered that this band is apparently primarily an instrumental act. This isn't Mitchell's first time singing, but apparently these guys would only break out the pipes on occasion in their previous works. Honestly, I don't see why they didn't implement this sooner. Mitchell's a perfectly capable singer, and I enjoyed a lot of his work here. Hell, I don't have too many complaints at all regarding this album. It's a fun, heart-rocking piece of stoner rock nirvana. The guitar work is absolutely face-melting, and every song on this 6-track piece has something on it I like about it. Even the 2-minute quickie instrumental interlude, Volt Rush, this song almost plays like a punk rock tune interpreted by Jimmy Page. If I have one complaint though, I guess maybe it's that the songs are a little bit on the long side. Most tracks on this thing eclipse 8 minutes, which might be a little much for some. And why do I hear snickering in the background? Seriously, who's snickering at me? Why are you laughing? Jesus! I retract my previous statement. God damn, for real? All kidding aside, this album has apparently created a wee bit of controversy amongst their old school fans, given that this is actually, to date at least, their most accessible album. You see where I'm coming from there? Some people are accusing them of dumbing down their sound to be more mainstream. Well, can I just lay out a bit of truth for you here? Speaking as someone who didn't know about these guys until this album, someone who they were likely trying to convert by making their sound more palatable, speaking as one of those targets they were aiming for, it fucking worked. I'm sold. Complain all you want, but I'm proof that this theory actually worked out pretty well. I like this thing, and I'm interested to hear more from them. Would I say this album is, say, better than Sleep's new one? Actually, in this case, I don't think it's fair to compare. They are more stoner metal. This is more stoner rock. It's two completely different vibes. Apples and oranges, man. I will say this much, though. Whether you blaze or not, the groove on Black Heaven is absolutely solid. I would give this a shot. Black Heaven gets 4 60-minute guitar solos out of 5. Okay, hop along. Wow, this is a far cry from the previous band we talked about, isn't it? From shred city to indie quirk folk. Oh, that's gotta be tonal whiplash so crazy. It's got ambulance chasers following it. But no, Hop Along is apparently a project that was started by singer-songwriter Francis Quinlan as a solo project, like these bands often do, just kept adding more members and people until it eventually became a full-fledged band. This is technically their 4th full major release, and yeah, I see a decent amount of promise here. I can see why they're creating so much buzz in their scene. The music here is very well textured, and everything kind of fits together very well. The drums are a bit subdued, but not at all bland or lifeless. They're nice electric guitar arrangements that again are a bit restrained, but not by any means suffocated in the mix. There's even a fair amount of strings laced throughout the arrangements, a lot of it tucked into the back where it isn't too intrusive or overwhelming. Are you sensing a theme here? Every element of this band's sound is very well mixed and arranged. There's a lot of stuff going on, but no one element really overwhelms the others, and it makes for a very engrossing, very relaxing, folksy vibe. Everything just kind of blends together. I also gotta say, I really like Frances Quinlan as a frontwoman. Her voice is raspy and throaty, but also very high-pitched and pretty. Her lyrics are a nice balance of quirky vagueness and endearing vulnerability. I never know quite what she's talking about, but I can still feel what she's trying to express, you know? Her vocal delivery is very passionate, and she sells everything effectively. Overall, I rather dug this album, and I think I like Hop Along as a project.
That's great, Crash. What's your favorite song off of the album then?
The one that goes it's not. It goes wait. Okay, it's kind of like that, but I'm not. Hang on. I think it's got a P in it. Look, I did like this album overall, but I have to admit it does have a big failing in that it's not terribly substantial. I like it while I'm listening to it, and I wouldn't be too hard-pressed to say a lot of negative things about it, but as soon as I turn my device off, this thing just completely leaves my head. I can barely even remember I've spun it. It's very pleasant, but there isn't much on here that resonates with me, you know? It's all in one ear and out the other, and I can't help but wonder if the lack of any dominating force on the album kind of adds to that problem. And I hate how I can't seem to make an album that I admittedly like stick to me, man. That's gotta be points off, at least in some respect. That may just be more of a problem with me personally and my ADD riddled ass. I did like this album, but it wasn't terribly substantial or satisfying in the long term. Your mileage is definitely going to vary with this one. You'll want to spin it for yourself. But hey, if you're in the mood for some very pretty indie folk tinged chill rock, this is totally worth a try. But if you don't find yourself humming too many melodies from it afterwards, well, I'll be glad to know it wasn't just me then. Bark Your Head Off Dog gets 3. Things, you know, things that are, it gets out of 5. I will remember this, I promise. Just, God, snapping my fingers isn't helping. Okay, this is a weird request. This is one of the weirder requests I'll probably see this year. Church of the Cosmic Skull. They're weird. Really weird. They have this weird gimmick where the whole Church of the Cosmic Skull thing isn't just like a hipster cool name or whatever. These guys actually pretend to be in a cult. At least I certainly hope they're pretending. There's this whole lore and backstory behind why they dress like this, what the Cosmic Skull is, and in interviews they really play up the whole creepy cult thing. Honestly, I don't care about any of that. Like, legit, I could care less. You're peddling religious bullshit? Look, even if it's fictional, I ain't buying it. Give me some good music to talk about, or we're done here, Kemosabe. Well, thankfully, yeah, the music here is also pretty interesting. Hell, the lyrics don't even play into this weird theming they have going on here. If anything, a lot of their lyrics are really dumb. As in the cards that you're playing, a 5.5-minute song that literally only says, "I see the cards that you're playing," over and over and over again. Like, whew, man, if this is a cult, I really do not want whatever you're spiking your Kool-Aid with. I don't know though, some bands just feel like they need a gimmick in order to justify themselves. But this group, thankfully, does have some interesting musical chops to help back things up. This band is a colorful throwback. Good God, it feels like I've been covering a lot of those lately, doesn't it? To 70s prog. Okay, any fans of ELO, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Deep Purple, or early Genesis here? Okay, then let me introduce you to your new favorite band. These guys employ some very unique instrumentation to help execute their style of sugary prog pop. They often use 7-part harmonies with both male and female vocals, have an electric cellist as a permanent staple, as well as someone exclusively hired to play the Hammond organ. I told you these guys were a throwback, and buddy, I meant it. Everything here is recorded and mixed with that old school analog feel, which provides a very earthy, natural, and raw overall kind of sound. I didn't listen to this thing on vinyl, but it felt like it was pressed to wax. A lot of bands like to pay homage to the 70s, but very few have the commitment to carry out their devotion to this kind of level. In many ways, this is a refreshing take on that style of music. They're this wholeheartedly original blend of old Fleetwood Mac, Alan Parsons, early Yes, and the weird shit that Adult Swim plays at like 3 a.m. Has anyone here seen Children of the Mirror? They really give me that vibe for some weird reason. But look, I can make this review really easy for you. Go look up one of their music videos. They're still a fairly new band, so you won't have too many to sift through. Give those a watch, and you'll know immediately whether this band is your thing or not. It's unique, and while I do appreciate their admittedly very skilled instrumentation and knowledge of a hook, as well as their commitment to the raw recording methods that help create such an authentic 70s kind of sound, this band, they're just a little too weird for my taste. I don't know. This kind of 70s prog is just something I kinda gotta be in the mood for. And even then, if I want to hear something that sounds like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, I can just as easily dig up Emerson, Lake and Palmer, you know? But hey, these guys are very talented, and Lord knows they aren't devoid of charm. Even though these guys aren't exactly up my alley, I'm sure they'll gain at least a strong cult following. Science fiction gets 3.5 movementarianisms out of 5. It's a Sword album, alright. I've said in the past, the worst kind of album I can review is one that doesn't give me much to talk about, and it's a Sword album, for God's sake. Yeah, I remember Age of Winters, and it was fun, but I also remember coming across them again when Warp Riders dropped a few years later. And I got bored because it sounded like more of the same. A few years into that, I had been doing Rock Critic for a little while, and High Country came out. Hey, this would be good for a quickie, I thought, until I spun it and realized they still hadn't changed. Now here we are, 12 years. 12 goddamn years later, and I still have the exact same problem I had all the way back in 2010. The Sword. Dear God, these guys really do put my theory about there being nothing wrong with one-trick ponies to the test. Like, I can sum up this whole review right here, right now, if you like. Did you like all the other Sword albums you've ever heard? Well, this is another one. Go nuts if that's your thing. Although, I gotta admit, I'm tempted to not even say that this time, because while I pile on the sentiments of it being all the same, this album actually does try a few tricks that I haven't really seen put to use on too many other Sword albums. Like a few, some really small twists and turns. The problem is, the tricks they implemented kinda suck. This 13-track album has no less than 6 instrumental tracks on it. 6! And it's not just little transitional interludes either. Some of these instrumental tracks go well into the 5-minute range. And look, I'm not just decrying songs for being instrumental here. I'm a Rush fan, for God's sake. I'm well aware of how beautiful instrumentals can be, people. It's just that in order for an instrumental rock track to really thrive, it has to be unique. It has to have some kind of immediately identifiable feature, something that sticks out, be it a hook, a beat, or even something as simple as a quirky gimmick. The instrumentals on this album, they just sound like regular ass sword tracks that are missing the vocals. There's nothing on any of these tracks that I couldn't find on any other sword song. Hell, just write your own bullshit about Norse mythology, or take the notes from your last D&D session and crowbar all that shit in there. It would sound exactly like any other sword song. Like, come on. There also does seem to be a slightly stronger emphasis on like keyboard work and synthetic arrangements, like there seems to be on every album these days, isn't there? Lots of high-pitched, sometimes borderline chiptune-y kinds of affairs, but most of it takes place in the background and is more there for just like color and accentuation. Thankfully, these guys haven't been eaten by the Imagine Dragon, but hell, given how rampagingly innocuous this album is, I almost can't help but think getting devoured by the Imagine Dragon would be an improvement for these guys. They'd at least sound marginally different. I mean, I stick by my stance. There's nothing inherently wrong with being a one-trick pony if you're really good at your trick. But in my opinion, at least, the Sword's biggest problem is they're not that good at their trick. They were good at it back in the day, sure, but they haven't grown or developed an inch since 2006. In 2006, a 60s, 70s rock throwback album was really novel and cool, but it's 2018. We are so not hurting for retro throwbacks these days. People, I'm sorry, but this one did not even slightly impress me. This one's for die-hard fans only, people. Used Future gets 2 seriously worn out old LPs out of 5. Hey, speaking of die-hard fans, BAM is back! Yay! Yeah, I've really grown to love some Between the Buried and Me over the years. I've always had a small, casual place for them in my heart ever since I heard Alaska way back in the day, but that love has only grown and aged like fine wine as they kept releasing new material. Hell, Coma Ecliptic was one of my favorite damn albums of 2015, and man, it still holds up really well in my book. So when they were announcing a new album, yeah, I was all over it. And now that I've heard both parts, yeah, this is another good one too. Good lord, Paul Wagoner and Dusty Waring have some of the best guitar chemistry in modern metal, especially if you're into prog. They have a knack for writing some of the most colorful, most intricate, most spellbindingly lucid and intoxicating riffs and melodies the genre is capable of producing. These guys already get a good amount of love for that, but I'd say even then, that still isn't enough. These guys just kick ass. Dan Briggs pulls out another outstanding cavalcade of performances on the bass. Blake Richardson's drums are energetic and crazily well arranged. And Tommy Giles Rogers, man, this guy! Rogers is just so good at screaming, singing, and being able to switch from one style to another at the drop of a hat. Like, seriously, if all you want out of these albums is another handful of earth-shakingly good prog metal performances, you know what? You're gonna walk away from this one really happy. But BAM has always been able to deliver on that front, and on both of these EPs, they've delivered yet again. Wait, are these EPs? Are these like considered full albums? Are they calling them full out? I don't know. Yeah, getting back to that note, I do have a complaint about this album, and it's kind of a big one, even if it is super petty in some respects. It still really affected my experience with these albums in a big, fat, ugly, dumb way. There was no reason to split this across 2 CDs. What? There wasn't! I mean, yeah, there is a bit of a different sound going on with both albums. Part 1 is a bit cleaner and melody-centric, whereas Part 2 sounds like Part 1 is having a gigantic nervous breakdown. Also fits in well with the concept, I suppose. But I'm sorry, there's just no reason they couldn't have just mushed these two together into one coherent piece. All splitting them apart has done is, made us all sit on our hands for 4 months just to get a complete experience out of them. I mean, yes, I admit this complaint is petty as hell. Those of you that will be able to experience both of these at the same time without any kind of fuss, I kind of envy ya, because yeah, taken as a whole, these two albums are lovely, very lovely. It's a terrific album, but as two separate parts, they don't work. They're kind of incomplete. They don't stand nearly as well on their own as they do together. So why split them apart in the first place? Look, I'm sorry, I don't get it. Maybe there's something in the greater concept that justifies it or something. But, man, whatever that reason may be, I don't care. This approach to releasing the album rubbed me up the wrong way, and it forced the patron who requested this to have to twiddle his thumbs for 4 months while bam got around to delivering. Look, I'm sorry, dude. I know I've been pokey about these requests, but in this specific instance, it's all on these strikingly handsome dickheads. Again, though, it's a small, petty, and now that both albums have been released, completely meaningless complaint, and as long as you can listen to both of these albums at the same time, it shouldn't bother you. But again, man, why do this? Automata 1 and 2 gets 4.5 DLC packs out of 5. Dorothy. Just Dorothy. By principle alone, this band needs to tour with Toto in Kansas. Dorothy is actually a project fronted by Dorothy Martin. Makes sense, I guess. This group has been creating a decent amount of stir from themselves recently, and good God, do I understand why. This is some powerful ass, old school feeling rock and roll. Again, with the throwbacks. Sword, do better. This is instantly infectious, stomping, and outright danceable, and chock-a-block with ferocity and attitude. This is cool as shit. This is the kind of stuff you'd hear in a Tarantino soundtrack. If he doesn't have Dorothy Martin on speed dial, he desperately needs to add her to his Rolodex right fucking quick. Martin herself is an exquisite performer with a simply bellowing and powerful alto cry. She reminds me of Grace Slick in the 60s or Ann Wilson during the 70s. She's a belter. She shakes the walls with her voice when she wants to, but good God, does she also have a terrific amount of range, control, and an excellent sense and feel for vocal dynamics. Some people are just singers. Dorothy Martin is a full-blown goddamn vocalist with a bullet. Her performance alone sells the absolute shit out of this album, but her pipes aren't the only asset here. She's a terrific songwriter to boot. 28 Days in the Valley is an album that feels straight out of old-school Hollywood. Stories of decadence, exuberance, wild and crazy romances, the highest kinds of highs and the lowest kinds of lows. It's got this almost skeezy feel to it, but it's a feel that adds to the album's charm and character and isn't just, well, skeezy. And the musicianship here is absolutely gorgeous as well. Beautiful, soaring guitars, full of 70s rock-style solos and arpeggios, thick and fluid bass lines, punchy and organic drum work, and lots of old-school organ thrown in there for good measure, too. Again, it has a classic rock, heavily analog feel that doesn't at all come off as dated, or like it's trying to plagiarize this kind of style without fully understanding it. Dorothy gets it, and they are more than happy to teach you how it's done properly on this album. Honestly, this thing feels like an excellent companion piece to the latest Kyle Craft, another analog kid rooted in the old school whose album really impressed me this year. If that album was your jam, then you need to pick this thing up immediately. But at the same time, it's also not 100% fair to lump them together. They have some pretty striking similarities, but these two are still very different kinds of acts. Whereas Kraft is more focused on his storytelling and musical experimentation, Dorothy is a bit more straightforward and focused on absolutely nailing that rhythm and groove. To put it another way, Kraft is a bit more Dylan, these guys are a bit more Stones. But hell, if you listen to Kyle Kraft and it wasn't your thing, I could still recommend you giving this a try as maybe the alternative that hits the sweet spot for you a little more nicely. No one can deny their musical chops, brilliant performances, or the outright raging heart and soul this act possesses. And my God, you better believe this is an Album of the Year candidate for me. Dorothy is a name to be remembering, people. Which is a bit nice, because Dorothy is an easy name to remember. You don't see a lot of Dorothys these days, do you? 28 Days in the Valley gets 5 white butterflies out of 5.